Alright everyone, got a little bit of a bonus video this week on how to create that really cool space background that you see on the Planet Photoshop homepage. Got a lot of people writing in shortly after we launched that saying, hey, how did you create that really cool space background? And alas, here we go. We're going to start with an image here, and here I have, just so you can see, if I go under image and go to image size, you're going to see that I'm working with a relatively small dimension file, 6 by 6 inches, but it has a very high resolution, and that's because of the noise distribution that we're going to use to generate the star field effect. So we need a higher resolution to generate a larger field of stars. So on this image, I of course want to be working on a black background because space is black. So I'm just going to press Command or Control I, and it will invert that white background to black. So let's go ahead and now create a new blank layer above that one, and I'm going to press Shift Delete. And we'll get the fill dialog, and I'm going to use 50% gray, as in the menu right here. Click OK. And making sure we've got our foreground and background colors to their default, black and white, let's go under Filter and choose Noise, Add Noise. And here we're going to use the noise. We're going to go with the amount all the way up to 400%. And we're going to leave the distribution set to Gaussian and leave monochromatic checked on. And then we're going to go and click OK. Now, on that same layer with the noise, we're going to go under the filter menu and choose blur and choose Gaussian blur. We're going to give this a very, very small blur at about 1.5 pixels. I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and click OK. So it smooths that out a little bit more. Well, now we're going to bring up our levels. Let's go under Image Adjustment and go to Levels to the very top. Here's where we're going to generate the star field. We're going to take the dark slider here, this shadow slider, and push it all the way over until those stars start to actually look like a real star field. We're going to take the white slider and push it in a little bit just to make it a little bit brighter. Let's get those in there. You really got to kind of play with it. You almost really want to decide how many stars you really want to see. Now, it can be a little misleading because what we're looking at now, when we click OK, you're going to see a difference. Some stars manage to creep back in there, which is okay. That's really no problem. So, we've got our basic star field. What I want to do is I'm going to load these stars as a selection. I'm going to load the luminosity since these stars are white against a black background. By loading the luminosity, I'm inherently loading those white dots as selections. So I'm going to press Option Command and then the tilde key, which is a little wavy line next to the number 1. This is the very same thing as going into your channels and then Command or Control clicking right on the composite channel right here, just like that. Does the exact same thing. Now, you can see very faintly some of these stars are twinkling, and that's because of the little marching at selection that's active on those. So let's go ahead and create a new blank layer. And I'm going to go under the Select menu and go to Modify and go to Expand. We're going to expand the pixels only by one, expand them only by 1 pixel. We'll click OK. So now you can start to see a few more of those stars standing out. Well, on that blank layer, I'm going to go ahead and fill these selected stars with white by pressing Command Delete. It would be Control Backspace on a PC. And now we can see those stars. So now they're existing on their own layer. Let's go ahead and add a quick layer style. So I'm going to go into the Layer Style menu and choose Outer Glow. And don't necessarily want to use that standard yellow. Let's click on that swatch and change this to a more cosmic, pinkish, purplish color. How about that? And then we'll just click OK. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave the blend mode set to screen, but I am going to take the opacity all the way up to 100%, and then we get that. And you can mess with the size if you like. You can make them a little bit brighter. Let's take it to about 7. I think that looks pretty good. And then we'll click OK. So now we've got pretty cool colored stars going on. Well, I don't just want to have pinkish stars out there. I need to have some other colors. So let's go ahead and duplicate this layer. And let's double click on that FX icon to go back inside those layers, back inside the outer glow, and let's change this to more of a blue color. And do that, and we'll click OK. Now, that layer is overlapping the other layer perfectly because all we did was duplicate the layer, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom out, press Command or Control T to bring up the free transform, and then I'm just going to hold down my Shift key and then just rotate this layer around. Maybe all the way, let's do a 180 with it. So now they're offset and giving me a better distribution of the stars. Problem is, it's a little too crowded. We need to kind of fluctuate the brightness and darkness of certain stars here. We're going to do that real simply with a layer mask on each layer. So on this top layer, I'm going to go ahead and create a layer mask. And on the layer mask itself, notice we're highlighted around the layer mask. I'm going to go under the filter menu and choose render clouds. So you can see it rendered some clouds on there, and it's messing with the lightness and darkness areas depending on which areas are light and dark on the mask determines how much of it's going to show through. Now, if I run a levels on the layer mask itself, as you can see, we're still highlighted on the layer mask. Go under image adjustments and run levels. And let's increase the contrast of that. We can make some stars a little more or less pronounced. Just by pushing those sliders in a little bit, we'll click OK. So if I turn off this bottom layer, there you can see what we've got going on there. It's an even more or less evenly distributed visibility of the stars, so it kind of gives some depth to it. And this is all we've done. If I shift click on the layer mask and turn it off temporarily, that's what we had. And if I shift click back on it, that's what we've got now. So it's a little bit better distribution of them. So let's do the same thing with this layer. Drop a layer mask. And again, highlighted on that particular layer mask, let's go under the filter, render, clouds. And again, let's run a levels adjustment just like we did a moment ago. Now just press Command or Control L. And we'll increase or decrease how much of the stars we want to be visible. You can see the change is happening as I do it. Just like that. So it looks pretty good so far. So let's add some nebulous clouds, why don't we? So let's go ahead and create a new blank layer at the very top of our layer order. And we're going to do just like we did a moment ago, run a clouds filter, but now we're applying the clouds to a regular layer and not necessarily the layer mask. So got a nice distribution of clouds. I'm going to bring up my hue saturation. Let's go under image adjustments, hue saturation. And I'm going to activate colorize, and I'm just going to leave it to this red color that it applies, but I am going to increase the saturation quite a bit to about 40. And then we'll click OK. Then let's go under filter and go to blur, radial blur. And I'm going to set the target to the upper center area of my image. We're going to set the amount to a full 100%. And we're going to use a zoom blur method here. Click OK. And we'll blur that cloud in there. What I'm going to do in the layers over here is actually change its blend mode to screen. And it will blend in with the space and the stars a little bit better. But I want to mask it in a little bit better. I'm going to add a layer mask to this image. And again, we're working on the layer mask itself right now. Using the gradient tool and making sure we're using this second one right here, which is the foreground to transparent. Using black as my foreground so we mask out or take away part of our image. I'm just going to come in with the gradient tool from all four sides, holding down my shift key, coming in from the top, from the side, from the bottom, and from the other side. So there we get a kind of a cool nebulous cloud in the middle of it. Let's do one more thing to finish this off. Let's duplicate that nebulous cloud. And then I'm going to press Command or Control I to invert the values. As you can see, it inverts the colors. I'm going to press Command or Control T, and this time I'm going to control or right click on it and bring up the warp. Haven't used a warp in a while. And I'm just going to grab in this bottom square here and just kind of push this cloud up so we get kind of an interesting cloud configuration here. Kind of looks like a weird nebulous cloud in there. Now look, we're getting some edge detail here from that the edges of the image that are brought in from that layer mask. That's simply a matter of grabbing my brush tool, painting with black, and just brushing those areas out. Again, working on the layer mask. Notice we were on the image there. Let's make sure we're highlighted on the layer mask itself, then paint with black to remove those areas. And then there, we pretty much have it. A really cool, nebulous, starry background, all from scratch right there inside Photoshop.